Today we have back Rob Levy, my good single guy friend. What are you doing back here, Rob?
I am back here for to be back on the show to interview you as politely as you interviewed me.
Rob is here to interview me, and I have no idea what's going on and what's going to happen. So I don't really have an intro for you. So Rob, you can start.
I'm gonna have to roll my sleeves up on this one. So I was generously interviewed by Christine Chang, and it was a good fun time. I emphasize the fun part when she had me on the spot. So second time on the show, she promised last time and this time I'd get hair and makeup, but she lied. So no hair and makeup.
Your head looks good though.
Thank you.
Not
Thank you.
shiny, not too shiny.
No, not too shiny. Yes. We're here to talk about your audience, which are, correct me if I'm wrong, mainly single women from ages 25 to
Probably 25.
45-ish, 50-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. But single women.
Yes, single professional women who would like to meet their life partner.
Cool. So tell me, from your point of view, knowing your friends, knowing yourself, why do single women always love and absolutely thrive on going out with douchebags and assholes?
Okay, if a woman is in that stage, and I will admit, I was in that stage for a very long time, and there could be several reasons. They could be brought up to think that that is attractive. They could also have low self-worth. That's probably the top two, and I've experienced both of those things.
Well, would you say too, though, but when you were in a frame of mind, people said, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
And I'm looking for someone who's going to treat me right. I'm looking for this. I'm looking for that. They say that they want a specific type of guy. They actually define the type of guy they want, but then yet you'll see them going out with the guys that are more douchebaggy and asshole-y.
Right.
Yes.
And that can also be what feels familiar to them too. Because if that's what feels familiar, either based on a relationship dynamic that they had with their parents about someone who like abandons them or is always running away and they have to chase the love, that can feel familiar. So maybe they're not aware that they mistake that for like, oh, this is how love is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So it could be unconscious on that part. It can also be, a lot of women, they do find that sexy when when there's a little bit of unsafety.
Okay.
Right.
So yeah, they do find the little bit of the unknown, the danger,
yes,
the kind of little tug of war, and they get that from a man being not nice to them,
unavailable. Mm-hmm. The not nice. What would you consider? People. There's different levels of not nice.
There are. Most of my friends, if not all my friends, they're gentlemen when they take a woman out on a first date, and they were raised that way, and they naturally were that way. And I know that as they've gotten older, they've had to tweak their success to get second and third dates by not being who they are, by not being nice, by not being as genuine, by maybe not being so interested in the person, which is interesting. It's very opposite, and so it kind of leads me into our next topic I want to talk about. Let's just talk about the dating side of it. So when a man meets a woman and they're chatting, a lot of times women will say, "Oh, looks aren't that important," and I say bullshit. I say that looks are important to women as well as a man, but to women as well. It's definitely, I do agree that it's less important to the female than it is to the male to start with. But what would you say to men who, let's say they're meeting someone for the first time, they just don't feel attractive. Maybe they just don't feel they look good, or they're dressing good, or whatever. What is something a man could do right away to make a woman feel attracted to them? Something by actions or words they say.
Well, confidence, I think, is always sexy. Mm-hmm. And confidence is something I don't think that can be faked. And if it is, I don't think it'll last long term, because there are some books and trainers out there that will teach guys how to get women. And if at the core you're not confident, but you're doing these things that they say to do, like peacock. I don't even know some of these things to get their attention. Mm-hmm. Sure, okay, you got her number, but how long are you going to keep her around for?
Right. So being confident, but from a genuine point of view.
Genuine, yes, because energetically people can feel it. You can't fake that. And the thing is, you don't, like, for example, like you want to make her laugh, right? Or just you want to be funny. So a lot of it is also just self-love and feeling good about yourself. Because if you really think you're funny, you won't need her to laugh at your joke. And I have experienced that before where a guy, he was an aspiring stand-up comedian, but it was very important to him that the other person laugh. And if I didn't laugh, he would point it out. And I didn't find that attractive.
That sounds so unattractive.
No, but he would say it in a way that just really that acknowledged it, but in just like a little, very subtle way. But I kept thinking, like, why does it matter if I laugh or not? Because I find it so endearing when someone laughs at themselves and laughs at their own joke. It's so, guy or girl, I'm gravitated towards it because you could see their self-love and they don't need,
happy, right?
And they don't need anyone else to laugh. That is attractive. So I think it sounds cheesy, but if you have self-love, if you like yourself and you don't put pressure on the situation, you're just there to have fun.
Right.
Right. And you don't really care. It's fine to want, like to prefer a certain outcome, like, oh, this woman's really beautiful and she seems really smart and funny. But as soon as there's any pressure put on there that you really are like forcing a result, or there's like a desperation for a result, people feel that.
Yeah, I agree. I do feel like, and a lot of that times, what do you think gets in the way of, what do you think makes something more pressure? Man or a woman, you're going on a date and you want to be yourself, but you're feeling like you're being not authentic.
Yeah.
What do you think generates that?
I think trying to control a specific outcome versus being in the moment. Because when you're in the moment, you're playing.
Yeah.
And things are organic. That's when the magic happens.
And so, I mean, it's fair to say like two people could be great for each other. They're on the first date, second date, and they need to break down those barriers, right? So maybe the first date or even getting to know each other, one of them's in their own way. They need to just get out of their way, right? And just be themselves. So part of that is that trick is to be yourself, right? So would you say that for most women, for maybe your audience, do you feel like they are themselves when they're beginning the dating process?
I would say majority no. And by the way, everything that I'm saying right now is easier said than done. And I've been there before where you're so nervous and you just would really want something to work out. And you think you have to be a certain way for the other person to like you. I've been there. And it's very common. Most people, man, woman, anybody will show up to a first date with almost like a character of themselves. It's not the real them that their good friends and the family see. Like when we were out in the lobby and I asked you, I was filming some stupid like Insta story video, and Rob is he's a silly person, and he's messing around with me. And then I asked him, I said, are you like this with all your friends? He's like, yeah. And I asked, are you like this with girls that you have just met and you go out on dates with? And he said, hell no. And I said, you should be, because it's so cute and it's so charming. And I feel like if more people just did that off the bat, it would be way easier.
It would. And I think that's the art of getting out of your own way. And like you said, self-love and not feeling the need to be liked. And I do think people still put this imaginary pressure on themselves for the dating process, From a woman's point of view, how does she know there's going to be a second date? When is that decision made? Like mentally.
I feel like probably within the first few seconds of meeting the guy in person.
Which goes clearly against the whole, hey, we got to break down our walls and get to know each other, right? Yeah.
I mean, everyone's different. You should absolutely give people a chance, though. That's something I see in strong women. Is they can be very closed off and not give people a chance. But I'd say a lot of women are intuitive, and you kind of know, but you don't always know. That's the thing too. Maybe you think like, oh no, there's no way. Like I'm not going to be attracted to this guy. I've had friends who they thought that about the first date with their now husband.
Right. Yeah. I've heard some horror stories from people that are married now. And I'm like, wait, you went out with him again after that? That sounds like the worst experience. Like, run. I would tell you to run. But it's true. I feel like, a good rule of thumb would be to say, you know what? I'm just going to go on this first date if you're dating this person, going out to see if it has potential, not if you have other agenda. But if you're going out and you're saying, you know what, I want to see if this person's worth dating, just to throw away the first like 2 dates, just to go out, not even worry about it, and just go and, like you said, have fun. And if you try to be as genuine as you can, but say, hey, you know what, let's try for 2 or 3 days. But it goes both ways, because the female could also be saying to herself, or not the female, but the one person could be saying to themselves, hey, I'm nervous, and I'm hoping to get a second date, and the other person could just be turned off and say, wow, I just don't feel a connection. So I do think getting the show going is a bet. So getting from third date or beyond the first few dates to something a little more intimate. So usually for a guy, the first time is something. For a woman, the first time of having sex is different as well. So would you say that women the first time are very genuine when they're intimate?
When they're having sex?
When they're having sex? Or do you feel like, or just intimacy in general? Are they, do you feel like they're being, because they want their man to feel like they're turning, or their person to feel like they're turning them on? Do they feel that, are they being genuine, or are they doing a lot of faking for the first few times? Do women fake a lot to start the dating process?
I think that's pretty common on both sides that people do. And this is when you hear people say things like, oh, in the beginning they would do this and they don't do it anymore.
And what is an example of that?
Like wear sexy lingerie, or like wax or something like that. Like, you don't do that anymore. And
you feel like it's common in most relationships?
I think it's pretty common, unless you've done a lot of, and I think it depends on how you met your person. There's a lot of different factors here. I think I used to do things like that because I wanted to impress the other person. I wanted them to like me. When I met Pete, I was at a point in my life where I was I was more comfortable with who I was. And
stop showering, all that kind of stuff.
And take it or leave it. But in a headspace of, I didn't feel I had to do anything differently with him. And I was very okay that if he doesn't like me for who I am and how I'm showing up right now, which is the real me, then he's not the one meant for me.
But even with that, even with where you're comfortable, wouldn't you say you still do certain things to make yourself more attracted to him, or attractive to him, to elicit a certain kind of attractiveness from him? Would you say some of the things maybe definitely early on versus maybe now, or?
Honestly, for us, it hasn't changed, and I'm being 100% honest when I say this. It was different with them. I never felt the need to do that, and it always just felt. I felt like I knew him for a long time, and that I don't know if I don't care is a good way to say it, but I just wasn't attached to, I didn't need anything from him. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like I had to do anything to create anything. I just show up and just enjoy the moment, enjoy the conversations, enjoy being intimate, enjoy kissing, enjoy having sex. And as long as I was enjoying it, it was fine. But I didn't feel any need to do anything
so the
extra.
Things that you were doing was just part of who you were, so it was easy to maintain that. It wasn't like you said you're going to do something now, and then as things changed, you stopped that stuff. All the stuff that you did that made him attracted to you was just part of who you were. You continued. And I did talk to some of my female friends about this, and they said yes, as far as the doing things early on, and their words to me that were genuine was, yeah, we like to trap men. We like to trap men, and we will do things to trap a man. And as soon as we got him, we changed. And I feel like the people that have a not genuine relationship, that's the formula. One side or the other, because I've seen guys do the same thing. I've seen guys flaunt money and flaunt this and flaunt that and flash ego and show this and that. And then as soon as they get in a relationship, they kind of turn it off and switch a little bit. And the woman's like, wait, what's different? But from a guy's point of view, I've seen a lot and I've heard a lot. And this is the first time I heard a woman say, yeah, we like to trap men. I was like, wow, you're being very blunt with me. Now, have you ever done that? And do you know people that will act a certain way, and then as soon as they're in a relationship, they flip a switch, consciously or unconsciously?
Yes, I've done that before. I don't think I mean, those relationships just didn't last long. But I will say I was a version of me that, I mean, we all have different parts of ourselves. But I would say when I was dating as not my full genuine self, I felt the need to be more feminine than I naturally am. And there is a soft side of me that I want to nurture. But there's another side of me that's very fiery and very dragon type A-like that I wouldn't show them. It's almost a formula for that's not going to work out long term. I wouldn't even show them the real me. I wouldn't show them that side of me.
That was in the past.
That was in the past.
You don't try to trap men now anymore.
No, I don't think trapping people or tricking people, that's like a desperate way. It's almost like fear-based. Like, I need to trap this person to get them. And I would hate for it to be done to me, to feel like someone bamboozled me, like tricked me.
Right.
You do all these things and then I learn you're a cheap ass or something. No, I don't want that.
I agree. And it's a perfect formula to have a miserable relationship and to either get stuck in one and be miserable or to just have a failed relationship. That reminds me.
Oh no, you brought stuff?
I brought stuff. So last time I was here, Cece was so kind to bring me a croissant and some carbs, knowing that I was on a diet, and she was trying to trick me and trap me. But she doesn't do that.
I test you.
Oh, I see. That was a test, not a trick or a trap.
Yeah. Distinction.
Okay. So, from the guy's point of view, we just like to please, and most guys are romantic, just genuine at heart. So I brought something for Cece that I know she would like.
Lemons? Are they lemons? They are lemons. Rob has a lemon tree. See, I view this as love. Right.
Not tricking or trapping.
No.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, you're such a good person.
So I do feel like in general, when a man loves a woman, that he wants to make her happy. That's his kind of like source is rock. And he does like it when they laugh and does like when they're happy and when they do nice stuff. When it's a genuine relationship, that's how from my point of view, that's how a man is really into you, is because he's doing things to make you happy. I've seen a lot of times that won't get recognized. So the woman, I feel like in general, in the dating world, the woman starts out with a, hey, what's in it for me kind of attitude when they're going on the dating process. And it's kind of like, what's in it for me? But when there's a transition to a relationship, that needs to be let go of. And it has to be more like, okay, we're together. Like, this is what's good for you is good for me, as opposed to what's in it for me. Have you seen that, from the start of a dating, it's a what's in it for me kind of a approach? And not that it's wrong. I feel like there's a courting process, which is great. It gives a little kind of push and pull, get little romance, a little fire. It's great. But to carry then, once you're in a relationship, if the attitude of what's in it for me still exists, you end up with a man who's burnt. Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. That's not healthy, and it's not fair either if it's always about you. Well, I think naturally when you go into a relationship, you, from both sides, you look of how is this beneficial to me? Because otherwise, why would you be doing it? Right? I mean, a relationship should enhance your life.
It should. I think the best relationships do naturally enhance and merge and create a stronger union, rather than make one person stronger and the other person neutral or weaker.
Yes. Yeah. And for a healthy relationship, it's not all about you. You have to learn to give
Yeah. Well, how would you? I think sometimes though it's the kind of momentum of it, where during the courting process, and I blame guys just as equal, but they're they're courting, then they finally get the relationship and they're together, and there needs to be a kind of a natural transition to to that next stage. And how would you recommend the women to pursue that without losing passion? Because you don't want passion to die, at least not at that point. But you don't want passion to die or cut, right? So how would you recommend that from both guys and girls?
For that transition? Yeah. That's a good question, because I actually don't even know how to put it into words or define it.
Let me give you another formula then. So generally the masculine energy wants from the feminine energy, generally they want support, compassion, and inspiration. So during the courting process, a lot of that inspiration and compassion is just fire. It's just the conquering, the getting, the uniting, the coming together. So now as that starts to settle down, are women aware that, or is the feminine side, I should say, aware that they need to bring to the table inspiration, compassion, and support?
I think that some women forget that. I can forget that too in my marriage. Yeah. So either I have to.
You're welcome, Pete.
I have to catch myself, or someone will call me out on it.
So how do you? You do have a very successful marriage, So I do want to acknowledge that the dynamic between you two is phenomenal. Thanks. It's great. Like I even when they're mad at each other, I'm like, are they mad at each other? I'm not sure. Are you mad? I'm not sure, but because the communication is also great, and I think you guys get each other. But think about when you guys first started dating, also maybe to now, how do you inspire him? How do you support him? And how are you compassionate towards him?
Well, the compassion, I let him do him, and I do my best to allow him to do him, because he gives that to me and it feels so good. I love how that feels.
Can you give us an example? Like, think of an actual thing that happened.
Sure.
Or didn't happen.
Sure. So Pete one day was in bed, and then we usually just dump the clean laundry onto the bed, and he starts folding the laundry. I took video of it because he's still under the sheets, but he's just laying in bed folding it. And I thought it was so funny, and I posted it. And my sister saw it, and she said, "You don't get mad at him when he does stuff like that?" Because I think it's cute and it's funny and it's easy to. I think the old me would have criticized him, like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
What would the old you have done?
The old me would have criticized him and say, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, get out of bed," almost like a mom, right? Uh-huh. And like fold it, like be more efficient with the way you're folding it.
But instead, you found it to be cute and adorable.
Yes, and that's work I've done on myself and hanging around married couples that inspired me, seeing how the women showed up and how supportive they were and lighthearted and how they laughed. Because that's not what I saw growing up. My mom could be very critical of everybody, and just like the grumpy lady sometimes, and it's just not fun, right? And then I wanted to be a fun partner. I want to add to someone's life. And Pete, because he's such a great partner, he's been such a good role model for me. So he shows me what feels good. So I do my best to give that back. I will say sometimes I'm not as good as him as being supportive, because he's a great listener. He's patient. He'll listen to me talk. He doesn't talk that much, though. I think that's what makes it easier too, is that he doesn't need someone to listen to him for hours. Because I think if he did, I wouldn't be the right partner for him.
Sounds great. So I think the key point that I heard was that it's a give and take on both sides, because I'm sure some people are thinking like, well, I don't want to live with someone who's going to do something like this all the time, but there is this dynamic of allowing him to do certain things. Now, if it seems like if he was doing something that bothered you 24/7, you would have you might be able to have a discussion about that, as opposed to something happening here and there, finding more endearing rather than something you need to lecture or nag.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that I want to be very careful of because you hear like people say over the time of marriage, like the woman becomes like your mom, and I don't like that dynamic. I don't want that. I think in certain senses you want to be helpful. For example, like he forgets putting on SPF a lot, and that is his family is prone to skin cancer. So me reminding him like, babe, you know, don't forget the SPF. That
Yeah.
is fine, I think, but trying to control every little thing. And my life coach helped me with this because I can be very controlling because I'm used to doing things my way with work and stuff like that. And I was single for so long, so I had to learn, I'm still learning that not everything has to be done my way.
That's good. That's very good advice. And I see that a lot, and especially with guys that roll over easily. And there's some guys, again, like I do feel like the guys that are stronger, more alpha, more into themselves as well, or the guys that are they quote unquote have their shit together. They will start drawing lines, but there are some guys that want to please their women. They'll roll over on some stuff, and then unfortunately, that also can pile up into kind of hidden anger. So that's not healthy either. Having the ability to know that you're not nagging, and that you'll draw the line on certain stuff. So if there's safety or as health's concerned, you might get a little aggressive. But other times you'll do things a little more creatively. Like I know, one thing Cece does, which I like, if I noticed though, is for example, when we're doing our last few interviews, she checked in a few times with me to make sure that I was aware that I had an interview with her because she didn't want me to forget. And but she didn't say, "Hey, want to remind you, we're having an interview tomorrow, next week. You're going to be there, right?" She would just, and maybe you did it consciously, and maybe you did it subconsciously, but I'd get something like, "Hey, after the interview tomorrow, we're going to go out to dinner. Do you want to join?" Or, "By the way, you could park over here. If you get here early, you can do this." So she's reminding me by just giving me some helpful information, as opposed to saying, "Don't forget, we have an interview tomorrow." So those are creative ways to not nag, but also remind.
Yes, to remind, because nagging, I'm sensitive to nagging too because I felt I didn't like that growing up from
Mhm.
my parents, and so I'm just sensitive that I don't want to, because I find it annoying when people
Mhm.
do it to me. So I mean, yes, I just want my way of reminding someone is also giving them helpful advice too. Hey, the building's under construction. You can park on this street. There's 2-hour parking.
But you do it strategically, because whether you know it or not, and maybe you could tell us if you do know how you're doing this, because you could just give all that information right up front,
I
but
could.
you piece it so that it's and that's good. To me, that's good way of kind of checking in. It's good strategy. Do you do that naturally, or is this something that you've worked on?
It's something that I've worked on working with different people, well, in business and personal life. I think, well, people have different preferences, but sometimes, well, number one, if I give all the information in the beginning, a lot of times I'll get asked again, like, where's the studio? And I hate repeating myself. I get
Yeah, I hear.
really annoyed.
Yeah.
So I almost anticipate, that people are going to ask me that again. So I give them the info that they would need,
Mhm.
date, time, let's confirm that. Here's the studio address. But then when I follow up, I almost know most people will ask again, what's the address? Or, something like that. So I'll
Yeah,
repeat
and
that.
your fall. It's very nice. It's very strategic. The timing is always good. It's not too early. It's not too late. But I do note that it's a good communication way, and I feel like in relationships, you may do certain things like that, because when you're dating someone, especially as it gets past 3, 4, 5 months, you don't want to be that nag, but sometimes, especially, I know guys will tend to forget things. They'll tend to not think certain things are important, because it's maybe not as important to them, but it is very important to their partner. And so that could end up making relationships volatile. And I think, that it's a nice skill to have, to be able to communicate with someone without being very straightforward, being more subtle, is being more effective by getting across what you need, but also in a different way.
Yes, and I think with some people, they're more intuitive with things like that. They can read other people better. If you're a people person and you're really good at business, generally you have those skills. I feel like sometimes people, my husband, Pete's so wonderful, but I feel like which it's one of the qualities I actually like about him, because it's what you see is what you get. And he wasn't afraid to tell me how much he liked me. But I wanted that. I wanted someone who was clear they wanted to be in a relationship. I didn't want to feel tricked in any way. I just wanted someone really genuine, and like what you see is what you get. And that's Pete. But that also comes with, sometimes I do notice when he's trying to network and things like that, where I can intuitively tell, because like good conversations is like a ping pong match, right? It's not just dump everything, and there's a little push and pull like to it, and I feel like I naturally feel that. But I took communication classes, because I think growing up I was very shy and I was not good at communication. So even having that intuitive sense, but learning how to talk to different people is a useful skill. And I learned that it was a program called Landmark Education, and one of the courses just helped me so much with communication.
So getting back to the trapping and tricking part.
Okay. Do you have trauma with this?
No. Yeah. So getting back to that, it's definitely not a healthy thing for the relationship to do that. But I think in general, most people will put, some kind of facade forward just naturally. In general, I mean, the people that really work hard at themselves and really, like you said, have a lot of self-love, it just naturally they don't. But in general, at all ages, depending on what's going on in your life, something could have happened to trigger you, and you just need to feel a little bit more wanted. Maybe you have an insecurity about something and it's just temporary, but you're at a point, you meet someone, and let's just say that they've put out some things that aren't genuine, and then they're in a relationship with someone. I feel that what happens in a lot of these is a woman will, and even if they are genuine, will get a man or someone and start to, again, we talked about last time about jenging, pulling apart and trying to change that person. And have you done that?
I have tried to change someone, yes.
Obviously it didn't work out.
No, it did not.
But I mean, I do know why that they do it. I feel like it's the what's in it for me, and I just want someone who's going to do this, and once I get them, then I'm going to start, training them like a dog to do my bidding and get into that mode. How can someone be aware that they're doing that? Because I think in a lot of cases they're just not aware that it's happening.
You're right, because it's not always strategic. Some people, they don't even know who they are yet, and they don't know what they want out of a relationship. So they show up how they think they're supposed to show up, and it's not the real them. They haven't done the work, or maybe they're just really young, and you're still finding out who you are. So it could be unintentional. So I think the best thing you can do before jumping into a life partnership or long-term partnership is to really know yourself and really know what you want to give to someone else. And I feel like when you know yourself really well, you'll know when you've met the right person.
Which is true. Well, that's true. However, especially the younger people, they're not going to know that. Part of the dating process is actually to realize, oh, I had no idea this was important to me, and now it is important to me. And instead of trying to change that person, bringing it up or having a good way to say, hey, this is what I want. And if that person can't give it, then it may be time to separate, which is easier said than done. But how can they be, is there anything that, just based on your experience, that you could reflect on, that that you're trying to change someone instead of, to me, the best thing to do is you're aware that this is important to you, and you step into that place, as opposed to pull and make someone step in that place. And if they come along, then they
Yes. Do. Okay. Understood.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and you realize that, oh, I'm in this partnership, but I want this or need this. So getting clear on whether it's a need or want, like whether that's a deal breaker for you. Because it might be like, oh, I didn't realize I need someone who is honest. Is that a deal breaker for you? For me, that's a deal breaker. If someone cannot be honest.
And I think those are huge things. But let's say it's something to where, let's say the man is a weekend warrior and
Okay.
he likes to do sports on the weekend.
Okay.
And he likes to do certain things. And then in the relationship, that's part of the dynamic. And then all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5, 6 months into it, the woman starts saying, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this on Saturday. Can you take a day off of softball? Can you take a day off of doing this? Can you? And that actually that's actually trying to change the man. This is something they're into. And this is part of what made him who he was, and keeps his maintenance going and keeps his head straight. But then there's this kind of like agendaing where they want to then do things together as a couple, which is great, but also change his dynamic, as opposed to saying, hey, let's do something active together. Hey, I want to completely switch our habits and routine. That's changing a man, as opposed to, and maybe he wants to, but as opposed to, keep supporting him for what he wants to do and finding other creative ways to be together.
Okay, so a relationship is two people coming together. And at some point, there's going to have to be some compromise. And this has come up recently in my marriage, for example, where to live. Because when Pete and I met, he was living in Venice. I met him in Venice, and he loves Venice, where I don't want to live in Venice. I have other neighborhoods that I prefer. And this has been one of the biggest disagreements in our marriage. So it's important to talk about, by the way, where you want to live long term. And there has to be compromise because we don't agree on it. I mean, because if we just disagree, and then we wouldn't be together anymore. Like, fine, you go live in, or we could be together. We just wouldn't live together. I'm like, you live in Venice, I'm going to go over here. So it requires compromise. And he did bring up, similar to what you said, like, babe, you met me in Venice. I love Venice. But I said there's two people in this relationship, in this marriage, right? There has to be, you're telling me your needs, you want to be in Venice or near the beach or near your friends. I'm telling you, I need a modern condo with 2 bathrooms and da-da-da-da-da.
And air conditioning.
And air conditioning, 2 parking spaces, all that, okay? So, what...
I got a sore spot.
Where can we meet with this? Because I don't think it's fair for it to be one way or the other if we disagree. I think you should take both parties into consideration. It's not all about, well, I need this, and I'm just looking for a supportive partner to agree with everything.
Right.
Which some men maybe are looking for that, or women, and they just want someone to agree with them all the time.
Sure. And yeah, there's always going to be those. I think in general, especially for the ones, and I do totally agree that the compromise portion has to happen in the relationship. There are going to be give and takes. But, to credit to your spot, I think what you're not saying is that you did move to Venice. You did give it a shot. And you're finding like, hey, these are some deal breakers that, especially now in kind of COVID era. So your version of changing him isn't, I'm trying to change him. I'm communicating what I need, versus what I'm talking about when women try to change a man is really like, we need to move here. We need to do this. I'm unhappy here. I'm unhappy there. And really putting kind of pressure on the relationship, pressure on the guy who wants to see you happy, as opposed to you saying, hey, this is some of the things I need to be happy. Let's kind of compromise and talk about it. There's a difference in that. And that's kind of where I see trouble in relationships, is a woman not just making the decision and having an attitude about certain things, instead of, I think, how you're dealing with it which is a little bit more compromising, to have a compromise.
Yes. Well, it took a while to get here too, because I did do the thing where I complained about it a lot, and
like passive aggressive complain,
like really annoying complaining, like poor guy, it's so annoying. But I mean, that obviously had nothing to do with him. I was in an unhappy place. So I was blaming him subconsciously. I wouldn't say it, but the underlying tone was like, it's your fault that we live here and I'm unhappy right now.
So let's just say you could go back and just kind of adjust how you did that. What would you do differently?
I would not get angry. because I let the anger build up with that. And then I would take responsibility, and I would have the conversation that we had more recently about it, saying like, hey, I know, and also the mutual respect too, because to respect that he does want to live in Venice, but then also, hey, this is important to me as well. Like I literally wrote a list of things that I would like in an ideal home.
And you hadn't done that prior,
No, I had said it.
but you hadn't really said, hey, really gone through it.
Right, like I really need this. Like passing conversation. I mentioned things like I don't want to feel like I'm going backwards in lifestyle. Like I feel like guys are more, in general, well, I'll just say Pete is he doesn't care as much about his space. He could live in a frat house, okay, and it would be fine for him. And I said, yeah, that doesn't work for me.
Now, Pete's unique in that because most men do need space. They do need their man cave. They do need to have enough space to just have their own time. Majority of masculine energy will want that.
Yes. Well, his idea of his man cave and his time is living in a small beach bungalow in Venice Beach.
Yes, that's very different. All right, let's talk about red flags. I feel like a lot of people, in hindsight, say, "Well, I should have known because I've seen these flags." And people obviously they want to see the best in someone to get a relationship or something going, so they'll ignore red flags. I want to know what you think are some red flags for women and men. And I will tell you, my dad did tell me one time, years and years ago, he said, "Date women that have friends that are female. If a woman doesn't have any female friends, that's a big red flag. If they can't get along with other women, that's a big red flag." Are there exceptions to this rule? Of course. But in general, I've seen that to be very true, that women who don't have other female friends, is a huge red flag. Do you agree with that?
In some sense, I can see why it would be a good sign if they have female friends and long-term female friends. I think friendships in general, if a person has friends, I usually give that piece of advice to people when they first meet someone is look at their friends. Do they even have any long-term friendships? I mean, because it is a green flag or green light if they do have good long-term friends. That shows that they are capable of being in some sort of relationship that's long-term.
That's a good point. So what are some of the other ones? What would you say to a man, for example, if you see this in a woman, run? If she does this or says this or has this, run. What would that be?
So everyone's different and they're looking for different things. And it's hard to believe that some people would be fine with like a liar, right? But just say you're not.
Yeah. It's most people don't want, I'd say most people don't want lies.
Would not want a liar. So one is just getting clear on what you want and the deal breakers. Because if something like a liar doesn't work for you, then as soon as you see that, you'll be more clear then and you won't ignore it. She just lied about this. It was a really small thing, but she still lied about it. And if she's willing to lie about that, what else is she willing to lie about? So I think that clarity is important of what you won't tolerate.
Mm-hmm. What else? What else is a red flag?
I would say how she listens, like if something bothers you and you tell her, and how she responds to that, and if anything changes. Does she take you into consideration?
And I think that's the compassionate part that the masculine side needs. What about from the opposite side? If you see...
Oh, I feel like it goes both ways. But for example, for me, my core value is integrity. So when I was dating, if a guy showed me, and when I had the clarity on that, if a guy showed me he did not have integrity, if what he said and what he did not match, that was an automatic no. No matter how attractive I found them, how charming they were, that helped me filter them out pretty quick, where before I couldn't filter them out quickly because I would be looking at the charm, physical attraction, and he's funny and all that. But when it comes down to it, that was a non-negotiable. He has to have integrity.
Can you think of an example of when someone showed no integrity and you were like, that's it?
Let's see. I've dated many men that don't have integrity. I'm trying to think of
There's just too many examples to
if
give. We don't have
there's-
enough time in the show.
it's probably something just really subtle that they said they were going to do something like, I'll call you later, and they don't. Something as simple
Good
as that.
See, those are good examples. So, talking about integrity, it's the little things.
Yes.
It's a lot of the little things.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree, and those are big red flags. So last time we talked about how challenging it is for a guy to put together a first date in general. And from the guy's point of view, we talked about that, and if you want to see more of that, catch the last show. But from a woman's standpoint, what are they doing to prepare for the first date? That if a guy said, "Hey, we got to change. I got to do a new day. I'm sorry, got held up at work," and what from the guy's perspective they're not even aware about is going through.
Sure. I think it's disappointing on both sides when someone cancels. I mean, assuming you want to go out with that person. I remember being disappointed so many times when guys would cancel.
And that's integrity.
Yeah, just keep it. I mean, sometimes things happen, okay?
Sure.
If you have a death in the family or something, I totally get it.
Yeah.
But I value my time, so I just felt like it like my time wasn't important. Like I cut out this slot for you and and you feel really comfortable canceling like maybe multiple times.
Oh, yeah, multiple times is a red flag, right? Yeah, so canceling and change. So let's just say that there's something that does come up, and maybe the guy made a plan and completely forgot that he was supposed to do something. What is the best thing they can do to make up for that if they really wanted to see that person again?
Sure, that's it's all in action, and I think sincerity and genuine, like, I'm so sorry, I normally don't cancel this late, but this happened, and making a plan, like, can I call you tomorrow to reschedule? I think that is enough.
Yeah, because I do think flaking, on both sides, I think flaking is one of the big red flags.
Yes.
Because usually, again, there are exceptions, but usually if someone's into you and really wants to go out with you, they will make it happen. And of course there's exceptions, but generally to me, that's almost a non-starter for me. Tell me more. Let's go back to the lying part. I said to you, hey, well, men have to be creative liars. And you looked at me like, what? You lie? Yes. Sometimes you have to maybe not be completely honest about certain things.
I do not agree with that because I feel like you can with the right person and you can still be honest and kind.
So let's say that, I agree. I think with the right person, but let's say you're in a relationship with someone. One of the things is that person gets a little volatile. They are asking you questions, searching for you to give the right answer. Like, I just got a haircut. What do you think? And you could tell that they're really insecure about that cut, and you kind of tell a little bit of a lie. Tell me how not to get my head bit off.
Well, that's an art of being in different relationships too, because not everyone, you're right, not everyone wants to hear the truth. Mm-hmm. So when you're picking the person you want to be with, you have to know their communication style too. So personally for me, I am a direct communicator, and if I ask you a question, I want the honest answer. I don't want a bullshit answer.
Even if you're on your worst day, you had a horrible, horrible day.
Yes.
And you may be asking a question. You may be looking for a little bit of security or feedback. You want to be uplifted.
Yes.
You still want someone to tear you down.
I don't want them to tear me down. I would be more clear on, hey, I feel like shit today. Can you just be supportive and say something that makes me feel better? But sometimes I, something happened with Pete. It's when I tell him my business ideas, because I'm the idea person, I'm the dreamer, right? And he's more like methodical, like step by step. So sometimes when I tell him about my ideas, I haven't thought the how-to process yet. So he will say, because he's inquisitive and he wants to know, like how are you going to make money doing that? But I hear that sometimes as like, you're crushing on my dreams right now, or like it feels like judgmental, where some of my business friends or my girlfriends would be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And then you vibe and get more ideas. So I had to tell him, like, hey, when you ask me about like how I'm going to make money or how this, how that, I get that's how your brain works, but it can come off as unsupportive, where I'm looking for like someone to be enthusiastic about with me,
Right.
with my idea.
Right.
And he didn't know that. And I know his intention wasn't to make me feel that way.
That's the way his career brain works.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was clear that, so I didn't get mad at him for it, knowing like, why don't you just, say this, but more, I had to be clear, like, hey, I'm looking for support right
before
now.
you gave it to him.
I-
So his brain's like that, right? So he's that's just how his brain works. That's his career path, right? And so I almost feel like you're setting him up for failure by coming straight out and telling him your idea, as opposed to him and say, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you something. Not again, it's sometimes it's hard to do that because you want to just like share your excitement about something and get some feedback,
Right.
But maybe a quick thing is like, hey, I just want to share this with you. You don't need to, but again, you're very creative in setting things up strategically. So knowing things, so you can kind of prime him.
Yeah, and I'm learning too, because sometimes I do forget and I'm excited in the moment and I get this idea and I'll just say it, but I think I'm conscious not to put the blame on him too if he doesn't give me the answer that I want, knowing that knowing his intention, but also how is he supposed to guess what I need by saying my business idea?
Right.
So that also comes over time of getting to know someone too.
I think in general that is an art though. When someone comes to you with an idea, and men again, like Alison Armstrong always say, men are thinking, they want to solve a problem, they want to just go do it. So when a woman comes out with an idea, they just want to start like going into the action of it instead of just listening and being supportive, and kind of vice versa if a man says an idea. So just learning, I think for people to learn how to listen to something and not be so reactive and feel like they're being put on the spot to solve something. So like men, again, they were going to want to solve your problem. And so if you give an idea, they're going to look at it as like, well, hold on, is this workable? Is this solvable? And it is an art. I mean, I think the man does have to work on that to learn how to listen, so it's not always on one person to be responsible to get the outcome, but I think that's an art in relationships, is learning how to listen without being reactive.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm learning both. I think I'm better now, but like the way I'm wired, I'm not good at either of those naturally. I have to really make an effort.
And you don't want it to be you want it to become natural, so it's not something where you're kind of cutting passion, you're cutting, the natural dynamic by overthinking stuff and trying to, not be yourself. So, it is. I think that's why we're couples that are a little more refined, that can communicate with each other, can grow in that respect, while others, if someone does something they didn't like, then it's like right away, it's like relationship ending attitude. Instead of being like, oh, I didn't intend for that to be the case, and some people are a little more abrasive than others, so it could come off really bad.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah. So, what would, maybe on a final note or two, what would you recommend to your audience that are dating in the early stages, anywhere from the pre-first date all the way to kind of like before the relationship level? What would you recommend based on what we've talked about on maybe an attitude or point of view to give the best chance for success?
Knowing yourself really well, getting clear on what you want, staying open, listening. But I think being clear on what you want, because over those months, you'll learn more about that person. So you'll see. And when you know your boundaries too, of what works, like, oh, I'm learning a few months in that he doesn't do this, or like, oh, he does do this, So learning what are the, which are the deal breakers, and also communicating that too, of communicating what's important to you. So that they're aware of it too, because sometimes they could be like, oh, like, I didn't even know, you didn't even say anything. And so giving them a chance to respond to that and see if you guys can come to a mutual place. or if not to be too rigid about it either. And I'm guilty of this too. I think being like a business person, you just want to like, yeah, it works or it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think there's an art into having your boundaries, knowing yourself, and not coming out on the first date listing like, by the way, these are things that I need, because you could actually come across a guy who's just or girl, by really being direct, and throwing them off, as opposed to, and I do think being direct is great, but also having romance. Don't kill the romance by setting boundaries and setting this. Do it in a way that it exists. And if your boundaries are compromised, then you just cut it. Like, if you don't necessarily always have to say these are my boundaries, but knowing your boundaries, and when the red flags come up, then you can pull back or communicate at that point.
Yeah.
But there are some things that are important to communicate. But there's an art to do it where you don't cut the romance out, and it's this kind of like, feels like this contract.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be hard too, because with long-term relationships, if you're trying to build that, there is a practicality side of it. So balancing that with the passion, right? Because you want both. And it would be nice if it could be all like passion and just naturally goes, but that you have to consider the practicality part, which isn't the sexiest thing.
I think that's the trick though, right these days, right now, is keeping the romance, yet being practical and having those things in the relationship is that's the trick to it right now. The dating trick right now is to keep romance, while not compromising yourself and knowing yourself. And I think, I would like to say, well, how does someone start to know themselves? I think that may be a topic for another time. Yeah. But is there any quick tips you can give to people that think they know themselves, or that want to know themselves more, and can maybe take a few of these tips to do it?
Sure. Number one is being honest with yourself too. Like,
but how can someone be? How do you know? Like, if okay, you know what, I'm going to be honest with myself. What do I really want? Like, how do you get out of that and find what you want?
That's a good question. Well, a lot of it comes from just experience dating too. Like, oh, I didn't know that I actually can be attracted to this kind of person, or I don't.
So then
come from that.
When they're dating or out and they're noticing that they like something or don't like something, then to take a step back and make a note, physically or mental, but a strong note. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Is to start noticing, paying extra attention of what you like and don't like.
Absolutely. And viewing dating as curiosity, that you're learning about someone else, but more importantly, you're learning about yourself in the process.
Okay. Those are great. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think keeping the curiosity, I think is a cool way to look at it too, because you're not so I guess self-abusive to yourself for not knowing, and you're not getting down on yourself. You're like, you know what, I've got curiosity. And that's the other thing, is you don't always know what you like or don't like until sometimes it presents itself. I mean, there's people that have been married for years, or that have been dating for many years, and then something happens and they're like, oh my God, I don't like this. And it also could be something that they used to like. Yeah. And it's changed. So there's a lot of variables that can happen.
Absolutely.
One thing I would recommend is to talk to someone and come up with a values list. If you're seriously looking to date, if you're not, then just go and date and have fun, and keep in mind that you're learning about yourself. And if you find something, learn it. But if you're at a point where you really do want to date, you want to date seriously, to come up with a values list and challenge it with a friend. Don't just come up with something like, oh, I want someone with this and that, but really to come up with some characteristics that you like in people, and then present it to a friend who knows you. Yes. And have that friend challenge you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, one example is, if you just say you're a strong woman, but you think you're type B, and you ask your friends, and if one of your good friends who knows you says, well, the real you is actually type A. Mm-hmm. So take that into consideration, and not just, right. I think that's where self-awareness comes into play as well. And that could be learning. That's different for everyone. But I think being honest, and listening to trusted people too, and getting feedback like, oh, maybe I'm not what I thought.
Yeah, that's a good point, is actually talking to your friends and being an open mind. And if people start saying that you are, maybe if you're really not, maybe you're coming across that way, and maybe you're not aware of it. But there's these blind spots. You definitely have blind spots.
Yes,
And so
everybody.
by talking to people you care about or know you, of course, if you ask your parents, you're just going to get in a fight because they'll be very volatile.
Yes.
But asking people that care about you, that know you, and say, hey, this is, and they could be dead wrong, but this is just how it's coming across to them. So it's just good awareness.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember Gypsy, the healer that we've both seen, told me one time that I'm a control freak, and I'm like, I'm not a control freak. He's like, yeah, whatever. And when it comes to my relationships and my friends, I'm not. But in business, in my business side, I am. And so that was kind of an eye opener of for me, always wanted to do things, make sure that it's done this way, and I want to do it, and only I can do this and that. And then it's like, oh, it looks I am a control freak in this kind of sense. So sometimes it helps for people to zap you with something, and your first punch is like, no, I'm not, which is okay. But then listen to it and just kind of say, well, okay, where is this actually true?
Yeah.
So. Well, awesome. This has been great. It's been great to be on here again. Hopefully I get a chance to interview you one more time.
Again? You have more questions?
Oh yeah. I was just getting warmed up.
I know. These conversations on the two that we've had on the show are pretty tame for how, there's a certain level of professionality that we're trying to provide value as well.
Right. We're not really, how we normally are with each other and just really poke and pry and
this
throw
is like the
spears,
equivalent of a first date and not showing up completely as, we are who we are, but it's a mellowed down version.
Yeah. We're not really.
It's not as raunchy.
Yeah.
And
we're not really going cutthroat.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Next time.
Next time. Yeah. We got to work into it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christine. And let's do this again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.